just don't be afraid to jump in, and give it a try. Like I can remember in particular when I was a photographer, I can remember, getting these campaigns, sort of 2 or 3 months into my once I'd finished assisting and I was now getting my own authentic clients. And just, waking up and thinking, oh my God, like, how am I going to do this today? Like, I don't know, I know what I want to do. I just don't know if I can do it. And I think that we often surprise ourselves in the sense that, once you actually go and try, you can pull it off, and it might not be easy. You might have to, take a few swings at it, but you'll get there.
Are you ready to level up your journey? Welcome to Get On Top, where we dive deep into the riveting tales of self-made entrepreneurs and corporate titans who have scaled the summit of success. Get ready for a roller coaster of insights, inspiration, and a roadmap to elevate both your mindset and your life. This is Get On Top with Morgan Browne. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for being here on Get On Top. I'm so excited to talk to another Vancouverite.
Thank you. My pleasure. My pleasure.
Tell us a little bit. Of course, I deep dived you. I went down a deep dive. And a lot of the stuff that I got to deep dive you is all the projects that you got to kind of work on. And I think the first thing that resonated with me so much is how you started, like how you got into this business in general. Take me back on where your kind of journey started.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, I had no intention of getting into film or directing. It kind of came out of the blue in the sense that I didn't study film. I didn't study photography. I was on a tennis scholarship to the States when I was 18. Did that for a while, came back and finished some university in Ontario at Western, and then moved out west. Just, a girlfriend that moved out west and followed her.
A girl brought you here.
Yeah, just came out here. And I took a job as a tennis pro at Hollyburn Country Club in West Van.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, quite a nice introduction to the city, rolling
Beautiful.
up there every morning and seeing the views and meeting lots of obviously really interesting people. And I met a fellow named Alan Davidson who was in the creative world, and he owned a small ad agency. And so I started kind of, chatting with him, and he was a regular client. So we started talking about interests and life path and all that sort of thing. And eventually I met a photographer through him named Robert Ernest, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. And so I spent some time with Robert and ended up doing an apprenticeship with Robert as a photographer. Just,
oh, wow.
Completely, complete diversion from what I was doing. But I had no intention of teaching tennis. That was it was sort of a to B job for me, and I knew something else was coming. So did that, apprenticed with him. And then after a couple of years, became a commercial photographer. And at the time, there's a lot of boutique agencies. Brian Fulton She was in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of bigger ones, DDB and Cassette and all sorts of different small agencies. So I started doing commercial work with them, and all sorts of campaigns and clients and products, from food, A&W to the film festivals and various different things that were going on at the time. And I did that for about, I guess, 6 or 7 years, and ended up working a lot in the States and I did fashion photography, I did advertising, I did a lot of portraiture for GQ and, Vanity Fair type of stuff, although I didn't actually work for Vanity Fair, but that type of portraiture and that sort of thing. And I had a very distinct style. I had kind of really gotten into like a very limited color palette and kind of quirky themes, people in architecture and, really, really oddball sort of portraiture. And a couple of ad agency people in Toronto caught wind of what I was doing and started asking for me on projects and then requesting me to direct some television commercials. So I was honest at the time, and I just came back with, I couldn't turn a camera on, in terms of filming a commercial. So a production company in Toronto that was just starting up was called Reginald Pike.
Okay, yeah.
And really cool company, started by a fellow named James Davis. And there was some directing teams that were there. The Pelorian brothers, who've come to be very, very successful in the industry. Another woman named Yael Stev, a few others. And basically, it was a small production company. And somehow in that first year or two of starting up, we rose to the top globally in terms of the work. Canada was doing really great comedy and really great, storytelling, and it just took off. And so we signed a mutual contract with a company called Biscuit in the States, and all of us as, Canadian directors, and not all of us, like I'm actually British born, but a lot of us were from different places, but based in Canada, started getting this work in the States and started getting work globally. And it just took off.
It just took off.
Yeah.
Well, how did you find, of course, I'm stuck on this place of you going from this really kind of, competitive teaching type person to a person of creativity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people that are going to be listening to today have that passion and maybe drive to want to touch that, but they're so their identity has been so one way and not that way as a creative.
Mm-hmm.
What's your biggest piece of advice to those people that are listening?
That's a great question. I mean, I think there's always, along the way, I think there's always telltales. There's things that give you a hint as to where you want to be, but you don't realize it until you look back in retrospect.
Right.
So if I think back to my university days, like I really loved acting, and I acted in elementary school and sang in the choir and did all the all the things that kids do, that may or may not be, big in your life, or you don't perceive them as being a big part of your development. Sometimes they're just, a pastime, something that you try. I was, like I said, I was a really sporty, athletic kid growing up, and those were things that I just did along the way. And then, when I look back, I got to university and I acted, and I did a lot of theater and I acted in a lot of plays. And I thought about going to Juilliard. I had a professor who was sort of pushing me to go to Juilliard and apply. And in the end, I can't remember why, but I just didn't.
No.
I just didn't follow that path. And then, as I said, came out west and
pursued it.
Pursued other things. But, when I started directing, I was probably, a little bit into the path, and I kind of looked back and I was like, wait a minute, I've been an actor, I spent years as a commercial photographer, and now I'm using those skills in concert to direct television commercials. I work with actors. I understood how to cast. I understand how to, find a location, do production design, and, wardrobe. As a photographer, you kind of wear many hats.
You do.
So, so in retrospect, I kind of look back and I was like, wow, I actually, all of my skill set has aligned for this purpose, but it wasn't intentional. And I think that, a lot of people probably don't realize that everything we do really, it comes into the mix. It's part of the recipe, but when you're putting all the ingredients together, you're not exactly sure what you're cooking up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. It's funny though. I think you're right. It's like having these remembering that that's just like a part of your tool belt. You've got all these little pieces in you that over time, years through it, you realize are just part of the things that are just going to make you even stronger in some other field.
Mm-hmm.
What was the thing that just got you very excited in that creative world that kind of kept you there? Because some people might swerve into resin art, or some might get into that photography.
Mm-hmm.
Was it just like a pure passion and you felt comfortable there, or was it a connection of I'm good at this and I think I should stay in this space, like specifically photography? I think.
Yeah, well, photography. If I think back, I was at the end of an undergraduate degree. My intention was to go to law school. I'd studied philosophy, and that was what I was told was a great undergrad,
yes,
pre-law degree. And at the end of my stay at university, a friend said, "Let's take a photography course." I think it was literally called a Charlie Browne photography course.
Oh my gosh.
1 month, 1 day a week for 2 hours photography course. And honest to God, that is my only formal education in film or photography, other than on the job.
Experience.
Other than experience. So I took this course, really enjoyed it. And then and just became a hobby. And I had my dad when I was a kid had a dark room in the house. So I think, sometimes when you do have those things that you
Yeah.
do in life and you think, yeah, I can do this. Like this is something that I've seen or I'm familiar with. So it didn't seem insurmountable. So I got into photography, started doing that. And then when I did the apprenticeship that I was talking about, I can remember the photographer saying to me, well, show me all your work, show me everything you've done. And I think I had shot 3 rolls of film in my entire life. So I showed him the 3 contact sheets, which were, clearly
What were they up? This is my question.
random things,
Okay.
like my
Okay.
foot, like, I don't
Yeah.
know. They were whatever was within the vicinity of the camera when I was taking my first few pictures, a
Ugh.
motorcycle on the street, whatever it was. So, you start to build a skill set, I guess, in strange ways that you don't expect. And
And then you
yeah,
pick it up and you feel
yeah,
comfortable there.
yeah.
Yeah, which is such a good piece of advice. I think,
Hmm.
like, to not be afraid to kind of do these little courses and
Hmm.
still kind of find pieces of yourself to
Hmm.
hopefully get there, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think if I remember correctly, when I came out west and I did
Yeah.
the apprenticeship, I had a few oddball things that happened. One was that I decided to, I take a break from the assisting. I've been doing it for about a year and a half. And a friend of mine who lived in Whistler, which is a bit of foreshadowing to where I am now, but he phoned me up and he said, "Hey, I'm working at a heliski company in Whistler, and we need a photographer. Would you like to come up for the season and work as a heliski photographer?" And I said, classic, young approach to something like that. I said, "Sure, that sounds great." I said, "But I've got to be honest. Like, I don't really ski. I've never, I think I'd skied once in high school.
This is
And
hilarious.
so he said, oh, don't sweat it. You're athletic. Like, just we'll come up. We'll teach you." So I think I skied with him twice. So I'd skied, a grand total of 3 times in my life. And next thing you know, I'm going up in a helicopter with a 50-pound bag of gear on my back and skis. And I had no idea. And I remember there was a guide named Jun's son from Japan, and I still see him to this day. Lovely fellow, really, really now especially accomplished guide. And I remember
Mm,
pulling him aside before he went up, and I just sort of said, "Listen, June, like
I'm
I
doing.
don't really know how to ski, so any tips you can throw me, would really be greatly appreciated." So he was so kind and lovely with me, and gave me some tips, which luckily in powder was, just kind of point the skis down
Point
the
the
hill,
skis
and
down the hill.
you're not too far off. But I did that for a season,
Okay.
and then I think after that season, I decided to go and travel, Thailand, Nepal, and
Wow.
just shoot portraiture and shoot
Yeah.
pictures. And then I ended up doing a really one of my favorite series of images was in Morocco, and then I did the same thing in Cuba. And at that point, I think I'd started to get a little bit of editorial work with magazines and things, and
Beautiful.
so I was shooting. Do you remember
Of
Adbusters? Yeah,
course.
so Adbusters, funnily enough, they had me on some assignments. So I was, working for them at the same time working for ad agencies and magazines, and kind of a very diverse collection of work. But I got used to being in foreign countries and
And getting comfortable
yeah,
there.
interacting with somebody that, a random person that I would walk by, and asking them if it was okay if I would, take their portrait, and explaining what I was doing.
Mhm.
Actually, I got arrested in Cuba because I was taking a portrait of 4 gentlemen in front of, all those beautiful old cars they have.
Yeah.
So I was
Beautiful.
there in a rural part of Cuba. I'd sort of set out for a few days to just roam around out of Havana, and I took a portrait of these 3 fellows, and it just so happened that right behind them was a red and white tower that, unbeknownst to me, had something to do with nuclear energy or
Oh,
some form
wow.
of
Yes.
of power. And a policeman pulled up while we were doing the portrait, and I guess it's illegal to take pictures of anything to do with
Like nuclear.
nuclear. Yeah, so I got taken in, got put in a cell. They confiscated all my gear and all my film, which was
No.
with me, that was my biggest concern. And in the end, I had a promo piece. I used to do these little 40-page booklets,
Yeah.
pamphlets, kind of to promote myself to ad agencies and that sort of thing. And so in the end, I sort of made a trade. He was allowed to keep the book of
The
portraits, and
portraits?
I was allowed to leave. And I don't know if that was just that substantiated the fact that I was an actual photographer, or whether he just wanted
he wanted the portrait book.
The portrait book, I don't know. And it was actually, it wasn't a dark experience at all. It was kind of fascinating to be in the environment. I just wish I could have photographed it.
I was going to say,
while
you're
I was
in the
there.
cell. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I did that. And then from that point on, I think I leaned more into the commercial work. I started showing you at the time, you would go in and promote yourself. You'd go into an ad agency, especially locally, because it's a much more global world. But at the time, you just go in with your work, with your book, and say, hey, can I speak to, the
be whatever it may be, CEO, whatever of the company,
the creatives, and show them my book, or show a producer, a print producer, not that different from a motion producer, motion film producer, or so. So that happened, and I kind of just started getting commercial work, and that really opened my eyes to the industry, and so I started working in the States, and I got a couple of international assignments and U.S. representation and that sort of thing. So I think when the television directing, directing TV commercials came up, it was a little more accessible for me in terms of understanding advertising and working with creative teams and clients. And, I'd spent at that point a few years, sitting in pre-production meetings with clients. And one of my biggest print campaigns was, I believe it was for Toshiba. It's funny, I can't remember if it was Toshiba or Microsoft, but I think it was Toshiba. And they had bought all of the billboards in Times Square. So in Times Square, they have, obviously private billboards that are, have their own brands, but then there's a certain amount of these big public billboards so they'd bought all the billboards in Times Square, and we did a campaign, and it was the beginning of the internet. So it was all of these people, it would be a woman in an office, and she would have a Sherpa in the office,
so
and the
fun.
Sherpa would be pixelated, and the Sherpa looked really authentic, like he was straight from Everest kind of thing. And it was all about, the internet helping you, like being part of your work engine sort of thing. And it was all shot in LA, really high production value stuff. And I, I remember I couldn't go myself, but sending a friend saying, like, can you please go to Times Square and take a bunch of pictures of all these billboards and things. So I got to a great place with it, and, and had so many cool experiences with, with all sorts of brands. And then when television opportunity, directing commercials came along.
Where was that transition for you? Yeah.
So I had a friend, James Bland, who runs a production company in the UK now, called Arts and Sciences. He just called me one day and he said, hey, I've got a friend also named James Davis out of Toronto, who was British by birth and had started Reginald Pike, this company. That's the name, kind of has a British kind of
very good name.
Yeah, really funny name. So he said, I've got this friend, he's starting a production company and he knows about your work. And it just so happened that a creative team that James Davis knew in Toronto really wanted to work with me, and had contacted him. And the Florian brothers, who I was mentioning, Ian and Michael, these two gentlemen that created this directing team, I'd worked with them when they were agency creatives.
Oh, okay.
So they also served as kind of a reference for me, or was part of the demand, I guess. So James Davis said, listen, if you come on board, I know you don't know this world, but I'll help you along.
Help you through it.
We did some spec commercials. So we did some spots for the first one I did was in a morgue. It was for the downtown women's shelter. I wonder if I've got to get this name right. It was East Side Women's Shelter in Toronto. And it was basically a woman who was lying on a so I'm going to get this all wrong.
But this is interesting.
What do you call it when they're
lying in a shelter? Postmortem. Oh,
when they've passed. An autopsy. Thank you. So there was an autopsy going on, and the fellow's saying something about woman, and he starts to give a description of age,
of
55 or whatever, and she sort of sits up and not sits up, but somehow says she says, I'm 35 or whatever. So the whole idea was that these poor women in the downtown East Side, that are actually in their 30s or 20s or whatever, they've had such a hard life that on the table they appear to be old. But that one, that's probably not the
That's a
best story.
very funny story.
That's not the best story to reference. It's probably my least successful commercial of my career. But
it was the beginning to kind of get you into that space where you're like, and for those people that don't understand what spec means.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just kind of almost like a kind of entry to the commercial directing side, right?
It's not there's no authentic client.
Okay.
Although in this case, that was a real client, but it's sort of a teaser.
It's like a pro bono.
Yeah. It's
teaser.
A pro bono kind of teaser to say, hey, I can do this work and gets put out into the world. And so a better example than what I just gave is we did Pepsi mini cans. So Pepsi mini cans was a very successful campaign with a creative named Christina Yu, who ended up, she's very successful to this day. Just started her own agency in Toronto with some other people. So Pepsi mini cans was this clever little campaign for these. Do you remember the little tiny
little cans?
Yeah. So the idea was that the cans are small, but they're not that small. So, you've got a husband and wife, and the husband's looking into the camera as if it's the mirror, and he's got a mustache, and his wife walks into frame as he's kind of getting ready and doing his thing. And she says, you've got something in your mustache, and he kind of brushes one side of his mustache. And she says, no, other side. And he brushes it, and this can falls out of the mustache and lands at his feet. But it's very like art directed, kind of baby blue and tan, and very
nice
kind of
color.
And it was kind of a quirky little world.
Yeah.
And so there was that. And then there was another one where a woman was in her bathroom, and also the art direction was kind of, this kind of 70s pink, peachy pink kind of bathroom. And she's clearly just come out of the shower, and she's got a towel around her head. She's kind of got her finger in her ear trying to get the water out. And she kind of bangs on the side of her head, to get the water. You know how you do that?
Yeah, yeah.
And this can shoots out and lands from her ear into the sink.
How
amazing. And there's no funny tagline. It just comes up with a little super that says Pepsi mini cans, So
it's so clever.
So it's kind of inferred, that, they're small, but they're not that small. So it was like the visuals did the storytelling and the comedy. And then we did some work for.
But those aren't small specs, even though they're specs.
No, I was blessed.
So good.
I was blessed because James Davis and Christina Yu and the crowd that I landed with, they all were top of the game. I didn't realize it at the time, actually, how
high level talent it was.
I didn't realize my entry point was as high as it was, and the caliber of ad agencies and creatives that I was able to work with right from the get-go were top notch. Within Canada especially, and I ended up doing a lot of work in the States and the UK shortly after. But like another one of the campaigns, I'm just thinking we did a campaign for. This was truly a spec spot. So we did one. It was originally intended to be for Red Bull.
Okay.
And it ended up, we did it for the brand Guru. Do you know?
Guru.
Yeah, Guru, also an energy drink. So these were quite quirky and oddball. And so this one was called, I think we called it Get on the Bus. And it's a fellow who's outside a big kind of apartment building, very monochromatic, very vast,
big,
this big apartment. And he's this kind of downtrodden looking character in a trench coat and kind of a comb over and everything. And he's walking towards the bus, kind of trudging along, and out of the building, you would imagine his wife yells, "You're gonna miss your bus," and you see him look up and he kind of starts walking, and then eventually you see him sort of get on the bus and sort of,
fall,
sit down kind of thing. And then there was this kind of strange kind of roar sound that we used as an effect. And this character that we created for the delivery of the Red Bull or the Guru was this kind of like almost like the Lone Ranger kind of cowboy character with tassels. But it was like Evel Knievel and a cowboy mixed together or something.
Yeah.
So he walks up, and as this kind of dramatic sound effect happens, he kind of presents a can of, again, Red Bull or Guru, and the guy looks at it and cracks it open, and then you see him kind of arrive on the bus with all this energy and kind of like vigor, kind of thing. That's right. That's right. The presentation, I got it backwards. The presentation of the drink was before he got on the bus. That's right. And then you kind of cut to him getting on. So it was like the whole idea was, you get this thing, and then you you achieve something, but the thing that the characters had to achieve was so minute. He just had to get on the bus. So like another one was this massive man in a factory, like a canning factory or something.
Okay.
You can imagine very kind of like, again, monochromatic and, very, I don't know. It was not an uplifting world, but it had a lot of charm and character from an art direction standpoint. And he's this huge man, like 7 feet tall. We cast like a Andre the Giant type of character.
Oh my goodness, that's so fun.
And he's getting picked on by this little skinny guy, and they want him to arm wrestle. He's trying to.
I feel like I've seen this.
Oh, have you? Okay.
I feel like I've seen this.
Maybe
it's
on my Instagram.
Yeah, maybe it's on your Instagram.
So the skinny guy's trying to pick a fight with the big guy, and the big guy's putting like a stack of 10 sandwiches in his locker.
Yes.
Yeah, and so then eventually the evil Knievel cowboy comes up and gives him the drink, and the next thing you cut to Andre the Giant and the little skinny guy having an arm wrestle, but in our scenario, instead of the big guy crushing him, it's like tete-a-tete, it's like they're struggling, So again, it's a small obstacle that he has to overcome just to get the nerve up to do the thing. So I mean, and that's the joy, and that's the beauty of advertising and storytelling is these just getting into these clever little stories that are they're just a half a page idea, and then you kind of build them. And
what's that process like for you guys? Like, what does it look like when you're working with that client, or you're working with that person that, let's just say it's Pepsi, and you guys get around that table and start kind of discussing ideas? Is like, what does it look like?
Yeah, so
give us a little peek into that beautiful
I always
space.
Explain it to people as just the sequence. So you imagine you've got your client, so you've got IKEA. You've got IKEA, and they've got their
department.
What's that?
Do they have their department?
Well, no. Well, maybe these days some of it's in-house, but back, typically it's been ad agencies. So IKEA will go and they'll find an agency, and sometimes become the agency of record, and they'll say, hey, these are our goals for the year. This is what we want to achieve. And these are, we need to create a campaign to achieve these goals. So then they'll hire an ad agency. There was one called Zig back in the day that did the IKEA campaign, the Start the Car campaign.
Yes.
So they would go to Zig and say, hey, this is what we want to achieve. We want to make an ad for a sale, and we want to make it funny. And so Zig writes a concept down. They get a creative team, and oftentimes creative teams will have to write 50 to 100 ideas.
They must.
And,
yeah.
And to present. And, some of that gets thrown away internally, and some of it's chosen to present. And even when they present, sometimes they have to go back to the table 6, 8, 10 times or more. So then eventually the client will sort of bite on an idea. And then
after like a pitch from
after a
Zig.
pitch, yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's 3, 4 ideas. It's a campaign.
Right.
And then they'll go out. They'll get a producer to go out and start looking for directors. And there's thousands of directors now globally that direct TV commercials. When I first started, there was maybe 1,000 of us globally that did it. Now there's
right?
Probably 25,000 people that direct commercials globally. It's a much more competitive market.
Yeah.
And so then the way the process typically works is you'll get 3 or 4 directors that get shortlisted.
Okay.
And then those 3 or 4 directors will then do a call with the agency. They'll receive the script. Okay. They'll express interest. It has to be mutual. And then you'll do a call where the agency will take the director and the production company that the director's with through the concept. So the point of that is to just make sure that everybody's understanding the concept and where this is going. And it also gives the director the opportunity to ask questions and throw some, typically when I go into a call like that, I've already taken over the years, I've gotten better at it. I've taken the idea, I've written down my casting notes, I've written my, notes for production design, but more than anything, I've written down notes for storytelling and things that I think might be clever, to whether it's, specific thing that happens in the story, or if it's the era that the story happens in, or the location that it happens in. There's all sorts of things you can manipulate to make the story more interesting. And so you basically come back, you use artistic license to come up with your best version of their idea.
Beautiful.
And so then we back in the day would be a few pages. Now it's probably a 30-page document with a written component, visuals, little film clips, all sorts of different things to help you express. Sometimes you'll go so far as to storyboard the whole concept.
I was going to say, you must storyboard everything if you want.
If you want to.
If you want
Typically
to
that
that
happens
level.
when you're in production,
Okay.
but sometimes you'll do it. I remember pitching on a Stella Artois ad years ago, and I was really after this concept, so I storyboarded the whole,
Wow.
the whole thing. But so then you basically come back with a really comprehensive set of ideas and a roadmap as to how you see it, because this has to appeal to the agency who's creating the ad, but ultimately the client has to sign off on it and say, yeah, we're good with this vision.
We're on board.
Yeah, we're on board. And sometimes, you're really bold. Sometimes you've come up with something that's very, that's quite far off the original idea in terms of certain elements. The core idea is the same, but maybe the way that the story is being told is quite different. So
you have a lot more creative. You actually have a very creative freedom in that space in a beautiful way.
Yeah, in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, I think, the sign of a mature director, when they can come back with, the best version of the idea and confidently present it. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes they don't sign off on it. It's too risque for the client or for the agency, or maybe they feel it misses the mark. But oftentimes, if you've done your due diligence and really done your homework and you believe in it,
you can really capture something that needs to be captured at that time, which is so
you
nice.
can elevate the idea and bring it, bring the best version to the table. So, and that's part of the art form.
You bring up the Start the Car IKEA commercial, because I think people just were so shocked in that commercial, just not because of there's so much humor behind it, right?
Yeah.
Did it come out like that in that process? Was it as humorous?
What's funny is so a few of the things I remember about that campaign, and obviously
I'm sure you have a million
through the years
campaigns.
I've talked about it with lots of agencies, because I've been hired because of that ad. I've been hired quite a few times on other
you
campaigns.
You have so many incredible campaigns, but I will say that one, I think it resonates because it hit such a chord with the general public.
Yeah. I literally can go, I'll be in, Europe, and people will say to me, what do you do for a living? I'll tell them, and then they'll say, is there anything I would know? And I'll reference that. And it's amazing how many countries around the world, like Australia, I've been in Australia, or, I've been in various places, and, I mention and they're like, oh my God, I love that. It's usually it's actually the female crowd. It's usually like, my mother loves that, or my aunt loves that, or my sister, it's
I was thinking about it the other day. I was thinking, how many languages has that been changed into?
Quite a few.
It would be so interesting to be like, how many languages?
Yeah, they've actually done, not with me, unfortunately, but they've redone versions for different markets where they've filmed it in different
places.
Yeah,
so
different
resonated.
Different cast and different language and stuff.
Oh, that's so fun.
But when the original script came through for that, it was a great script. There was an idea at the end of it where the woman dove into the window. So when she got to the car, she dove head first into the window. So it was quite a bit more broad. And it's already quite a broad commercial because of her antics when she's walking up. But we did a few things like, I tried to make her, really just such a character. So when we cast it, when we cast it, normally, we'll cast for a day and we'll get 60 actors in or something. And by the end of the day, we'll have somebody that we can pick. And if there's 2 or 3, in that case, there's the husband, there's the main character, the shopper,
wife.
and then there's the person at the cash register.
Yeah.
And so you might get 30 or 40 for each role, kind of thing. But we cast the first 2 characters, the husband and the cashier, and the first day. But I didn't find anybody in the first day I liked for her. I had a very specific kind of, I wanted her to be quite theatrical and kind of,
kind of the blonde beehive energy.
Yeah. And then the second day, they allowed us to do a second day, couldn't find her. And then I said, can we just please do a third day? And I said, can we just focus on people that we don't typically see? Us, can we go to the theater actors in Toronto? And,
that's so interesting.
So that's what we did. The casting agent went and spoke to all the theater actors in town, and we got about 20 people, to do to come in, and she was a big time kind of she did theater in Stratford and in Toronto,
wow.
all the big
Yeah, the
plays.
bigger place.
And I can't remember her name. I should know her name, but she was lovely, and she was just when she came, it was like that's it, like that's the person.
Yeah, so
And yeah,
the immediacy of what you saw was there.
yeah. And so sometimes you have a vision in your head of what you're looking for, and then we did a few things to help her along. Like I remember, I wanted her to walk funny, so I said to the wardrobe stylist, "Can you?" She was wearing like
clunky
heels, but low heels.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Can you cut like a third of one of her heels off so she walks a little wonky?" So we cut one of her. So when she's walking, she's sort of like because
so clever.
Yeah, so little things like that that you don't they don't necessarily
make
the whole thing, but they're part of the fabric of what you end up with. So yeah.
Yeah, that was brilliant. There's so many of your commercials going through. I was like, oh, you recognize so much, and one thing that just has kind of I think after doing a deep dive in what you're doing, and because you kind of started as that quirky photographer, knowing your past of that, it makes complete sense. Like there's a lot of that vision of like being able to. It's so memorable, right? In what you're doing. You've worked with so many agencies. And some of them take bigger risks. Some of them don't take bigger risks. What are you finding? Like, what do you think made them trust you? What makes them trust you early on as a director? And
well, I mean, I think some of it is purely the real. I think that when the real shows what you're capable of and what you've done in the past. So a lot of clients want to see it on the reel. If they've got an ad agency's come up with a concept, they want a director that's done something similar enough that they can kind of envision it. It's kind of, I mean, in real estate, it's like, it's like people, some people have a vision and some people need to see it, how it's staged,
That's right.
So I guess a reel is like, showing them the staged version of what you do. But, and then a lot of it is the production company you're with and the reputation of the directors that are at the production company and how, historically they've, how professional they are and how well they've done. But, from a personal level, I think it's, it all starts in the initial call with the agency when you're presenting your concept and your idea. And I think they want to see that you have belief in the concept and you have a very strong understanding of where this idea is going. They don't want you to be wishy-washy. They don't want you to kind of wing it on the day. They want a plan. They want a plan of attack. And they want execution. So because really at the end of the day, what you're doing when you're shooting is you're still getting raw. It sounds strange, but you're still getting raw materials on that day because then you've got to go back and you've got to edit this thing. And you've got to add music. So the IKEA thing, for example, like we added a really quirky, like it almost sounds like the Jaws soundtrack. It's like, and there's a Ted Rosnick who ended up, being a very famous kind of music producer in the industry. He did the music for that, and so it's like all of the elements, the editing, the music. I mean, and the edit's huge, right? You can imagine, like, you can change the order around of things, and it all has an impact. So and you're, as the director, traditionally, it's clients are getting more and more involved these days.
Are they?
Yeah. But traditionally, you're the captain of the ship, even now you still are. It's just, I think there's more, sometimes things, they die by committee. Sometimes you'll have a really good idea and a really strong set of material that you present, and then it goes into the edit and everybody wants their needs met. Like I remember doing a campaign for Vicks, and we shot it in South Africa, and we were there for, I think, 6 weeks, and it was very rapid fire cuts. It was all about, you can imagine, Vicks, cold and cough.
Cold and cough,
So it was all these different, very quick vignettes, but it was meant to be all over the world. So we made, we obviously used, the craft sometimes to, we're shooting in South Africa. We made it look like Japan and Sweden, and we using, India. I mean, we downtown Cape Town. We dressed, this one section. We dressed it to feel like a market in Mumbai. We had 50 extras and all these different. So there's always things like that going on. But you're trying to get, you're trying to get somewhere, and you can imagine that the edit,
it must be just
it's a huge process. In that particular case, like VIX is global, so the Japanese VIX clients wanted it this way, and the English VIX clients, so they ended up doing like 30 different edits, kind of thing. They all turned out great, but you can just imagine, that there's just lots of cooks in the kitchen. So, and sometimes, ads, the work you do gets better, and sometimes it's diluted, so that can be challenging, but that's kind of part of, I think, in some ways, good clients often, understand that they've hired professionals to do this, and they sit back and let them do their work, and then have some input. And I think that maybe some less mature clients sometimes get their hands in there too soon. It's like, let's create the thing and then taste it. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've been taken all over the world to like really experience different cultures, but also just that side of production. Like how big are these crews that you're going with? I think a lot of people see things like a big production of a movie, and they're like filming in one or two of their homes. Can it be like a slim group of people that are just, or is it better? Like, what's better?
Well, it really depends on the story. So, like, I was just talking to, I just signed with a new production company in Toronto called Skin and Bones. So we were just having this conversation earlier today. But there was a commercial I did last year that everybody saw during the Blue Jays run.
Okay.
For the World Series. So it's George Springer, and he's at TD Bank.
I totally know this. Yes.
So
that was so good.
Oh, thank you.
And she really wanted him to come over.
Yeah. So that's it's a small cast. It's just two people. It's the banker and George Springer. So in that case, it's all about casting a charismatic banker. Like when she plays this kind of nervous person who's trying to get all the autographs from him, and that's she's trying to play it cool, but she's obviously getting the autographs for herself or her family or friends. But in that case, it's you've got a crew of 40 or 50 people around, lighting technicians, camera technicians, hair and makeup, wardrobe, all these different things. And then you've got your cast. And in that particular one, it's some of the challenges, like George has a stutter, actually. He has I remember talking to him and sort of sitting down with him and saying, "Hey, like, listen, don't sweat it. Like, this is film. Like, we can edit around.
All around it.
You can stutter halfway through your sentence and just take a pause and keep going, and it'll be fine." So there's little things like that can have an impact. But that's actually not your question. But
no, but I love that insight.
But it all depends on how many people extras. Like I shot a commercial in Buenos Aires for 7-Up, and it was called "Beware the Heat." So it was a guy who's literally trying to get away from the rays of sun that are beating down on him on a hot day. And so he starts to kind of run away, and you see him like, it's almost like a Bond film, he's running down the street, and he's, gets on a bus and runs through the bus and tries to find a pool, but the pool's empty because it's dried up from the heat. And
oh my goodness.
Excuse me. And all these different things are happening. And in the end, he ends up, sitting down at the side of a road, just hot and sweaty, and a 7-Up truck goes by and takes the corner too fast, and 4 cases fall off, and they all break, but one bottle rolls up to him, and it's
like this
refreshing, and he opens it and that sort of thing. But that I remember we had in the street scenes, I mean, I think we had upwards of 200 extras, and it was like a feature film, and we had an entire block and a half all, cordoned off to do this commercial. And we had cranes, and we had cameras on 3 or 4 different buildings. We had cameras attached to the side of chase vehicles, and we had, these bigger stories. Bigger stories require more people, more gear, more money, more time. So often when we go to Cape Town or we go to Buenos Aires, it's cheaper to produce there.
Okay.
Talent's cheaper. So for instance, in Buenos Aires, one of the things was we knew we could get those 200 extras for kind of like $50
a quarter of what you get in the States, right?
Kind of thing. In the US, they'd be getting $300 a day plus 2 meals plus overtime and
tons.
So there's strange things that factor in. Like I think eventually, I remember we used to shoot in Brazil a lot, but in Brazil they ended up creating a union for all the actors and all the extras and stuff, and so it became much more expensive to shoot there. And literally overnight, like production just stopped going there because it was no longer affordable. So,
Yeah.
which is, that.
Do you find that it's happening more and more in Canada because of that, like doing these commercials and they're being brought up here because of the dollar, or is it still
I
hard,
think that it is a positive for like Canada, as I said, there's a sort of natural discount built in, because of the exchange rate and another, and there's still a strong production facility in Vancouver and Toronto. So, I mean, you also want to go places where, all of the support staff is there. If you need stuntmen and you need animals, that are going to be in the scene, or you need special effects, all those things, that
they're all there.
Yeah, they're all there. So you need a little bit of that. Like, Mexico City has become a popular place to shoot because the production facilities have become better and better over the years. So yeah, so it's fascinating.
It's so funny you say that, because I just recently mentioning that I know people that they were like, "Oh, Morgan, you should put your house on
as a location."
As a location. I was like, "I'll do that. That sounds like good." And I didn't realize it was one guy in this city that runs this whole, like, this one guy.
Dave Pink?
Dave Pink.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine.
You better tell Dave, highlight mine, okay?
Yeah.
But I said, Dave Pink is the guy.
Yeah,
he's the guy that
there's actually multiple companies, I'm sure, but he's definitely one of the more successful
guys that
location scouts. And
then he said to
managers.
me, just send it to me in an email. And I was like, I'm going to. But it is nice when you know where you're shooting, right? And you have people like that.
Yeah.
that are in those spaces. Now, you have often been described as the actor's director.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see in people that you think many directors are missing?
Well,
that IKEA.
Yeah, that IKEA. I mean, obviously, as a director, you want to look for unique traits. And so I think I'm always looking for that. But I lived in England as a kid. Both my parents are British. So that British humor, that sensibility, that kind of dry humor has always appealed to me. And I like subtlety. So a lot of the ideas, like a lot of the concepts I've worked on in terms of campaigns and, comedy pieces in particular, like, they're quite broad as an idea, but I like to execute them in a way that leaves you thinking, "Oh, that was so clever." Like that was, like, "Oh, that's clever." Like there's a little wink to humor, but the overall takeaway is, "Oh, that's clever." Like, I love that, So I would say people that have good instincts in that regard. Like, for me, when I go into it, like a lot of the work's done in the casting room for me. Like when I'm working with actors and you've got the script and, we'll workshop things, I'll say, try saying it this way, or, what if the classic is, like, let's, do one bigger, do one smaller, in terms of the energy or the whatever they're telegraphing, you're trying to get a variety of different deliveries so you can understand if on the day you want to try something different, can this actor pivot with you and execute, but
that's a good point.
Strong actors will have strong instincts. And I often say this to people, like, really, like, I'm talking, feature film actors and really, very successful actors, the Leonardo DiCaprios or the Meryl Streeps or the, whoever it is of the world, they're really intelligent people. Like, I think it's lost on the public sometimes how intelligent actors often are, because yes, they've got to memorize the lines. That's the first thing. First of all, that's not easy.
Just so you know.
Yeah.
I've done speeches and I'm still trying to do them. It is hard.
Yeah. And you can tell, like, an actor, even an actor that's got a good memory has got a leg up on the average person, because somebody that comes into an audition and they've got the script memorized to the point where you can give them feedback and they can pivot because they know the script.
Oh.
Whereas you'll get some people that are so nervous that you'll give them very specific feedback after their first take or two, and it will just come back exactly the same, because even though they're hearing the feedback, what they're actually doing is just thinking, "Please, God, let me remember the lines," and it just comes out exactly the same way. So, and that's an extreme example, but back to my point, I think that, actors that, really can be insightful about human nature and the human condition, and how do I react to what the other actor is giving me, and like, what is the the core idea that the story is trying to convey, and and how do you
what's that foresight? Like, I think they have such foresight for
yeah,
it, these
yeah.
actors. But you finding them is also just, I think a big part of like acting. From what friends that are actors and people, it is, you already have such a vision in your mind for these people that are going to be able to storytell this whole commercial or this whole production for you.
Yeah.
Having the know-how is, I guess, what you're saying is so important, is finding the right people to fit the puzzle within the whole thing.
Yeah.
Tell me, like, I mean, back to that whole thing about you and your comedy. It's so subtle. And I think that's the British, but it doesn't shout, right? Like, it doesn't shout, which is so clever. Yeah. Who, like, is it who you are creativity? Like, I guess, is it your creativity, or is it just that British side of you? Like, what do you like to, what makes you excited? What movies are you watching that are funny that you're like, oh, that's funny?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, Marty Supreme's out. I don't know if you've seen it.
I know.
That was phenomenal.
Someone came up to me and said it was a 9 out of 10.
I think that it probably is. It's probably exactly what we're talking about. It's a little bit subtle, and it's a big story.
It's a big story,
but it doesn't hit you over the head with, it's not broad. It's, there's a lot of moments in the story that are kind of subtle, but I just watched a film last night. I think it's called Goodbye June.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Did you see it?
But one of my really good friends was like, Morgan, you need to watch this.
Yeah. An example of,
has Tamar seen it?
Actors being, clever people. Kate Winslet directed it.
Oh.
And she's featured in it.
Brilliant.
It's such a deep dive into families and talk about, the human condition. This is like, there's so many universal truths in this film. Like, when you're watching it, you're just, things are happening between the siblings and between the parents and the kids, and you can't help but just, you're in your head. You're like, oh my God, I totally know that moment, or I've totally, I've seen that in my family or other families, or those sorts of things. So, I mean, I'm just there's so many films through the years. I'm a cinephile to the core, but I just love good storytelling, and there's every year there's a slew of them. I mean, as a director, I'm part of the Directors Guild of America. So we get screeners every year. They used to FedEx them to us, like 50 of them a year out of this big stack. Now there's an app that we use, and we get them, and, we have to sign an agreement that we're not going to share them and stuff, because we're seeing them sometimes before they're released. And ultimately that goes into a pool where, our vote goes towards the Oscars. Like, the DGA has some votes, sort of thing. So, and every year I'm amazed, there's 10, 15 films that are just, jaw-droppingly
incredible.
Good. Yeah. So
the Marty Supreme is so funny you say that, because everyone knows he's going to win now. Because you go through the award ceremony, and I'm like, what about Leonardo?
Right. Well,
I just want Leonardo to win once.
You never know that sometimes there's a surprise when you get to the Oscars. I mean, yeah. But no, I would say, I love, I'm a comedy director, so I love great comedies. I also love dramatic films and that sort of thing.
A mix of them both. Do you ever worry that it's going to be maybe not understood, or do you go through the process because?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so we did a spot called Hockey Canada Hand.
Okay.
And it was a story that was told in reverse chronological order. So you start with an old man, and he's in a retirement home. He's playing solitaire, and his hands are kind of shaking as he's playing solitaire. And his one hand is like quite dirty. And, obviously dirty.
Yes. And
then you go back, and it's the same man, and he's now in the last day at his office. He's kind of packing up his, he's worked in this office for years, and he's packing up the box with all of his belongings and leaving. And as he's, leaving, you see his phone's kind of dirty, and you see that there's various objects around the room. And even when he flips off the light switch, it's kind of stained, and you can see his dirty hand. And then, you go back, and there's all of these situations where, he's teaching his son to ride a bike, and as he pushes his son on the back to, there's a hand mark on the back of the son,
like dirty.
Yeah, dirty. And then you go back to when he's in school, and he's swimming down the swim team kind of swims by, and now we're kind of like in the 60s, we've gone back 10 years at a time. So now we're, we're back in the 60s kind of thing. And he's got this hand with a bag over it and he's swimming, you're thinking like, what the heck is going on? And then eventually you get back to a hockey arena and there's all the players, the Red Wings are coming out of the change room and Gordie Howe's walking towards camera, and it's, the 50s and it's all beautiful and, like that kind of vintage feel. And all these people are kind of hanging over the side. And this one little kid, you can imagine trying to get a signature, whatever, reaches out and Gordie Howe just happens to look and reaches up and shakes the kid's hand. And then the kid kind of after he shakes Gordie's hand, he just like looks at his hand, like he just stares at his hand and you realize that
oh my God,
he's never washed his hand for the rest of his life. So
yes, that makes
sense. So we've watched the story in reverse chronological order. So, when we first edited it, I would say like 80% of people got it and thought it was amazing. And 20% of the people would just had that look on their face like,
what? I don't get it.
Like, what? Like dirty hand, and then they would kind of cotton on. And there was a big debate because, the couple of the people at the agency were like, we can't air this. Like some people aren't getting it. And then we were like, but talk to the people who get it. Like they love it. And like, so, and sometimes it's, you have to kind of speak to the higher order in a sense of like your audience has to do some work sometimes. You've got to do something that pushes them or kind of, so that's one example. But I mean, I think that,
and building off of that is the integrity of your own work too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how are you putting up these frames as a director to say, okay, this is something I'm really happy with. I don't really want to move off of this, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever get to that point where the customer is like, I don't want to use it?
Well, yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier, where sometimes things die by committee because you present an edit that you really believe in. I mean, I think in feature films, I think you have more latitude that way to kind of have an artistic vision and kind of like stick to it and say like, this is my craft and this is how I want to present it. And, and hopefully the audience likes it. Whereas, when you're dealing with commercial work, obviously, the first audience is going to be the ad agency and the client, and they have to say, yeah, we love it. Like we're ready to send this out into the world. And, and you hope that you get a IKEA start the car or you get a spot that's, that
the
everyone,
TV commercial that I'm obsessed with.
Or, whatever it might be, right. That everybody loves. So it's, and that's the challenge in being a commercial director is from start to finish, sometimes you're talking about maybe 8 weeks, 5 weeks, sometimes if it's in a rush. So, from that initial concept on a piece of paper to, getting into the editing room and, shooting the film, getting in the editing room and doing all the post work. So
it's such a process and it's amazing. And I think what people are the audience is going to hear from you today is that length of time. I think people think, oh yeah, especially with what's happening with technology, a lot of, this is something I really wanted to ask you about, which is your thoughts on, just how that's changing. Like, of course, everyone, in my mind, I think storytelling is always going to stand in the test of time because to your point, they could be years and years ago and this one ad from Nike just hit you so hard and it's with you. But now everything's really going that short form. Like a lot of the younger generation is not as driven on that. Do you think that's changing at all or do you think it's the same?
I mean, I guess there's two questions there.
Yeah.
Technology and then
and if the world is
if the attention span has changed. Well, I'll start with the second one. Apparently, there's a whole trend of these like micro series that are happening. Apparently, they're very big in Asia. They're kind of like minute long or minute and a half long episodes, and then you might have 10 of them or 20 of them, whatever it might be for a particular brand. So like I don't know whether it would be
like Dior or something like that.
Gucci or Prada or whoever Dior. And so, and the idea there would be to like have a captive, create a captive audience that's interested in your story. And then you've got product placement that happens to be, relatable to your audience, and of interest to people. So that's,
that's a whole thing.
Yeah, that's a whole thing.
And the influencers that are kind of like, it's funny, some of the commercials you don't even see sometimes. And now the influencers are having so much influence on people seeing those commercials. Like there's like a whole new kind of world on I'm a millennial, so I'm a little older than some of these new Gen Z groups. But are you finding that it's like really great storytelling, really great commercials are still like really what agencies are looking for?
I do. I mean, even with like, when you mentioned technology, I wasn't sure if you were going to bring up AI or any of those
Yeah.
things, but I think that ultimately, like, storytelling as a craft is like, it's not going to go away. I mean, whether you've got real actors or whether you've got, AI produced actors, or you still have to have a great idea. You have to have, the story has to make sense. I mean, the craft has to be impeccable, whether
Mhm.
it's the casting or the locations or so all of those elements have to be executed in a way that's, it's spot on. You have to nail those things. Um, so I think that technology, like right now, what I'm seeing is that AI is really working well for helping us to present our ideas to the agency and the client to show them what we're gonna do.
Oh, great.
So we kind of can, help them to pre-visualize. So
Mm.
it's not so much of a surprise on the day, or just to take the guessing out of the equation. So that's,
So that's
that's a
really
part.
good.
Yeah, that's a part. And then, I'm sure, at some stage, I mean, ads will be completely AI. I mean, some have been presented. I think Coca-Cola did a big ad in Europe this year that was
Yeah.
presented, and then they had to pull it off the air because there was a big backlash against it because people,
We're not ready.
they just didn't
Yeah, they don't
want an
want it.
AI, a fully AI ads. But at some point they'll become, you won't be able to distinguish between the two. I mean, I guess
Mhm.
but yeah, back to the, notion of storytelling, like that just doesn't go away. I mean, good storytelling is,
I
you
know.
know, it's
In everything. I think it's the
mhm,
one thing that resonates so deeply in people's hearts and
mhm,
minds, and even for myself watching even influencers, it's funny talking to these looking at all the influencers, looking at it, they're almost like making little mini commercials to your point
mhm.
and telling stories.
Yeah.
I don't think storytelling is gonna go away anywhere, and I think more companies are still looking for something that resonates
Mhm,
home, that feeling for their
mhm.
brand.
Yeah.
But the question will be the next phase of that is, will it heavily go into AI eventually?
Mhm.
I mean, could, but I
Yeah.
think it might go into, it's not gonna ever take the movie.
Yeah.
And it depends on what brand it is. I think there always will be an essence to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
Well,
is
people,
good.
I mean, authenticity is in the last few years has been a big buzzword in our
Mhm.
industry. I mean, I think people want authenticity to a large degree when they're
Yeah,
when they're, you know, being sold something,
I know.
Um, but yeah, that's a
That's so amazing. I mean, I could talk to you forever, but I want one last couple of things.
Yeah, sure.
I'm like, I'm holding up your time.
No problem.
For anyone that's kind of early in their career, I
Mhm.
mean, who feels quite invincible, that wants to make some big moves. We're talking a lot about in 2026, specifically in your industry, directing, producing, whether that's just in some level of creativity. What piece of advice could you give them on your side, just with so much of your knowledge of um, jumping into, some of their goals for moving forward? What's
Mhm.
helped you, I guess? Maybe there's like, what's given you the gas to get you to where you are right now?
The first thing that comes to mind is, you know, as I mentioned, I didn't have a formal education in
No.
photography or film. I mean, I did go to university and I did study and studied acting and things like that. But I think that just don't be afraid to jump in, and give it a try. Like I can remember in particular when I was a photographer, I can remember, getting these campaigns, sort of 2 or 3 months into my once I'd finished assisting and I was now getting my own authentic clients. And just, waking up and thinking, "Oh my god, like, how am I gonna do this today?" Like, I don't know, I know what I want to do, I just don't know if I can do it, and I
Mhm.
think that we often surprise ourselves in the sense that, once you actually go and try, you can pull it off, and it might not be easy, you might have to, take a few swings at it, but you'll get there, and I think that, that adage about, like failure is just, it's just something along the way to success. So, I mean, it's, you're going to fail a few times, but that's okay. And, you just, especially these days, there's so many, in particular with filmmaking or any creative
Yes.
endeavor, there's so many tools out there. You can just, just go out and start creating, like just try, like have an idea, have a concept, of photographers, they always talk about, self-assigning a project, just say like, hey, I want to do a project about X, Y, or Z, whatever it might be, so.
You guys are just, in another level for me, because I've got this business. I have the business creative side, but for photography and film, you have to have such an eye. Like, I truly believe that. What is your kind of overall thoughts of the future of the world that you're living in? Tell me a little bit about that.
The world as a filmmaker?
As a filmmaker. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Living was a big one.
Yeah. No, I think that, as I said, the tools are changing.
Yeah.
They're more readily available. The diversity of what you can do is expanding rapidly in terms of, if you want a scene now with thousands of characters and things collapsing, that all of that's manageable. And I think that it's back to what we said. I think that storytelling is like it's a universal, not a truth, but it's a skill that won't change. It's that gift of being a good storyteller, it goes unchanged, and I think the way that you tell the story may change and the tools that you use may change, but I think ultimately it's like a great story, a great idea, execute, and the ability to kind of curate your own, you've got all these tools you can utilize, but if you use the wrong tool in the wrong way, or you're not very discerning about where you want to get to, the story won't be well told,
No.
So I think it's just, it's a continuation of like, storytelling as being the core element, a good idea, and like paying homage to that idea at any cost, like that's where you need to get to.
Oh,
yeah.
Mark, thank you so much for being on Get On Top. I literally could talk to you for another 4 hours, but I'd be like, let's go eat something.
Perfect. Well,
you just have given us so much. And I know that everyone that's listening is just going to is such a fan, just like myself.
Well, thank you.
And we're excited to see what the next phase is of yourself and all the projects you're putting out. We'll be watching.
Absolutely.
Yay.
Absolutely.